Bring your Bibles to Psalm chapter 23. 23rd Psalm. I'm going to take just a little bit of a break. When I say a little bit of a break, 1 week of a break. We are going through the Gospel of Luke, walking through that chapter by chapter, some lessons from that, and I'm taking a break on purpose. I didn't have to do Luke chapter 15 when Clayton Kelly was here. If you remember from a couple of weeks ago, he preached on that. So we're kind of looking ahead, and I didn't want to go to Luke 16 tonight because that's what Sunday morning is going to be about in Luke 16, kind of a little bit of a free shot right here. But we're going to go to Psalm 23 tonight. Psalm 23 is probably one of the most well-known of all of the Psalms. Well-known, probably one of the most loved Psalms of all in the Bible. It is very likely probably one of the most popular Psalms that we have. It's extremely encouraging. It's filled with encouragement, it's filled with comfort. You know, you've probably heard this in funeral settings. I've used it in funerals. I've used it at graveside. I've used it all kinds of different ways and different times. Most of us can probably quote the 23rd Psalms. I'm going to read it tonight. I've memorized it, and that was when I was doing most of my memory work in King James Version. I use New King James Version now, and when I quote it now, I sound kind of dumb because half of it's quoted in King James, half of it's quoted in New King James. I want to read from the King James Version tonight before we begin here in our lesson. Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. What a beautiful psalm that is. I was reading an article this week, actually this last week, and the article was talking about the 23rd Psalm, and it was making references to what goes into people's minds, some imagery we get when we're reading something. And the writer of this article was saying that he gets a picture of Jesus holding a sheep. I've never thought about that before. That's not really what I thought, what comes to mind when I think about that, but that's what come to his mind. And I'm not saying that's right or it's wrong, but that's what come to his mind. And I haven't thought about it. But I do realize and recognize Jesus is our shepherd. He is the great shepherd. He's the chief shepherd, is what the New Testament tells us. The image in some people's minds does come to mind, maybe is of Jesus. It was fitting this morning because Brother Barber was talking about AI in his Bible class. I had AI generate this picture for me this week. I just said, generate me a picture depicting the 23rd Psalm, and this is what it come with. And it's pretty close. It gives us an idea here, doesn't it? We see sometimes in our mind, we know when we think about Jesus that he is our shepherd, and he is giving care for us all. Psalm 100 in verse number 3 says, we are his people and the sheep of his pasture. Now the psalmist there is referring to Jehovah God. And we have that same promise in the 23rd Psalm earlier as we have it recorded in our English Bibles of God's great and God's sufficient care for us at all times. There's the comforting part. There's the comfort that we get from this. And this psalm should really help us stay faithful in dark times and in troubling times. You know, sometimes it's really easy when things are just going as they should, so to speak. We get this idea that, we can stay faithful when things are going, it's just day to day. We keep trucking ahead. We're good. But when those bad times come, we can fall off that wagon, so to speak. We can fall off this way or that way. Even when times are going absolutely excellent, when everything is going our way, we get all green lights going to work. We don't have to stop anywhere. We pull up to the fast food place, and what can I take your order? You get there, they pay, and it's already waiting on you when you go. You don't even have to stop. When everything is going our way, even those times we can start to falter. We're subject to fall at any time. But this psalm, many people turn to it in dark times. Many people turn to it in troubling times. And I want to say this on the front end. This is not the original way that I was going to present this lesson tonight. I was going to do this just a little bit different. I had planned to look at this and make some comparison with sheep and with shepherds. And I talked to someone in this building, and I was asking some questions because I don't know that much about sheep. I don't own sheep. I don't want to own sheep. Some people do own sheep in this building. Some people are extremely fond of the sheep that they own, that they have. Some people know of others with it, and they're not so fond with it. But there was a theory that I was reading about. They were talking about sheep, and they said that sheep are just very dumb animals. And that's what I've always heard. What little experience I've had with a friend of mine who had sheep, we would back them into a corner. And he always said, well, they're so dumb, they get into a corner, they're just going to stop and stare. We would back them into a corner. We'd pick them up and take them where we wanted to take them, move them where we wanted to go. That's what we would do. And I read an article, and this article disagreed. This was a recent article. I think it was 2023 is when the article was written. And it said that sheep, cognitively speaking, are extremely intelligent. I can't say one way or another. I asked one person in this building. They agreed with me because they were saying that they have sheep and they were actually able to train their sheep, their animals. So instead of trying to upset anyone, instead of trying to make some points on sheep that I just cannot attest to 100% for myself, I'm the preacher. I changed my mind. We're going to go a little bit different route. We're going to look at this textually, and we're going to look at this exegetically. We're going to pull some things out of the 23rd Psalm tonight. We got 6 points tonight. 6 points, 6 verses. This is what we're going to look at tonight. Verse number 1. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Here's the title of verse number 1 of the 23rd Psalm. The shepherd's sufficiency. The shepherd's sufficiency. We think about that word that sticks out here. What word is the first word that sticks out in your mind when you read it? What sticks out to you? Well, the second word, right? The one that's in all caps, Lord. Referring to Jehovah, God in this reference. But we couple these phrases and put all of these words together to make a phrase. The Lord is my shepherd. This is what David is referring to here. My. It's personal with David here. He was a real shepherd. When he was in his younger days, quite possibly he was the most famous shepherd in the entire biblical record. If I were to ask you, hey, tell me someone who is a physical shepherd at some point in time according to the Bible, David's probably going to be 1 or 2 on that list. I'm thinking on top of my head, I can't think of another on top of my head right now this moment. But we think about everything that goes with this. We could read 1 Samuel 16, 1 Samuel 17, and the Bible is telling us and explaining to us about David being a shepherd. In 1 Samuel 16, he's talking about him being a shepherd, and he's called away. And he's called away to be anointed as king. He's called away from his flock. We're told in the biblical record of David when he was a shepherd, he killed a bear and he killed a lion that was attacking his lambs, that was attacking the sheep, attacking those that he was in charge of. And he killed those animals. This is giving us images in our mind, powerful images, isn't it? Lessons that we can learn, that we can take away from. What David is doing here, the Lord is my shepherd. He's taking it and he's flipping it upside down. He's taking his experiences and he's flipping it. Now he is casting himself as the sheep. He's casting himself as a sheep and God as his shepherd. Now this is not just a clever idea in the mind of David. This is not coming from David. David is an inspired writer. Inspired with the Holy Spirit, inspired of God. This is what we are being told about. He's just as inspired as the other Bible writers of the Old Testament and the New. But David has given us a personal image here. And this takeaway is pretty insightful. With God as our shepherd, we're not in want. With God as our shepherd, we will never be in want. In contrast to how many people today, maybe even us, live in constant fear, live in a state of constant anxiety. Think about, I know you know people that are constantly in this state of anxiety, constantly worried about something. Does the Bible not teach us about this? Well, Matthew 6, Jesus teaches about it, right? Beginning of verse 25. He teaches about anxiety. Do not worry. He's promised us, John 10:10, what? That we can have abundant life. He brings the abundant life. Jesus' own half-brother, also inspired of God, wrote in James chapter 1, verse 17, every good gift and every perfect gift comes from who? It comes from God. This is where these things come from, where there is no variation. This psalm can be a powerful reminder for us. When God is our shepherd, we'll have everything that we truly need. With God as our shepherd, we simply will not want. This is what's on David's heart. The shepherd's sufficiency. Verse number 2. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. This is peace in the pastures. Peace in His pastures. Because everything belongs to God, right? The illustration here of the shepherd is extended in a beautiful form for us to take some imagery away from this. This picture of sheep, they are in absolute excellent condition. Right? They're made to lie down in green pastures and right beside those still waters. They're not just lying down to rest. They're lying down with legs tucked underneath them, given the idea here that this is complete safety. This is complete peace. They're at rest. And I've been told for some other people, I reached out to a friend of mine who's got sheep, and I asked him if he could confirm this, and he said yes. So, if I'm incorrect, anyone, if you want to correct me, I'll give you his phone number. You can call him and you can talk to him about it. But he said sheep will not lie down if they are hungry. I've read that. I didn't know that. He said it, so I'm going to go with it. But this is giving us the idea that they are satisfied. The complete satisfaction here. The shepherd has led them to lush and green pastures with good grass, with everything that they need, with the still waters, the calm and peaceful stream, the access to everything they need, resources. This imagery is representing the peace of God. This has given us the idea that the kind of peace that Paul writes about. Remember what Paul wrote about peace? Philippians chapter 4 and verse 7. The peace of God which surpasses all understanding will guard your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. This is the kind of peace that Paul had in mind. The deep calm that the good shepherd knows that everyone needs. Peace in his pastures. The shepherd's sufficiency. Look at verse 3. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for His name's sake. Verse number 3 is talking about being restored and guided. Being restored and guided. A good shepherd just does not feed their sheep. There's more to it than that. I can remember being younger. My grandfather was sick. He had some problems with his foot, and he would tell me, go feed the calves. I would go feed them. That was all I did. I'd get the buckets, I'd fill them up, I'd put the buckets in the trough, and I'm on to whatever else I was going to do for the day. I learned from my dad that there's more to it. Because he would tell me, hey, go over here and give this herd some mineral or give them some feed. I would go, and then he'd ask me questions about them. I don't know. I learned when feeding the cows also meant to count them. Well, try to count a bunch of cows moving around. It's like trying to count everyone here in this building. There's more to it than just simply feeding them. The psalmist knows this. David is knowing this when he talks about this. God obviously knew this when he's talking about this. A good shepherd is actively seeking to give them, to restore them. God does the same for us. Peter writes about it in 1 Peter chapter 2 and verse 21. to this you were called, because Christ also suffered for us, leaving us an example that you should follow in his steps. Jesus suffered for us. He left that as an example for us to walk in his steps. Do we make connections here? He leads me in the paths of righteousness. He leads us. We need the leader. We have the leader. We have the example. When we need to be brought back to health, especially when we're lacking, when we've got problems, be led back to where we need to be. And he does this for his name's sake. Think about this. Think about this name's sake for just a moment. Think about a shepherd's reputation. If you were living in the days of David, and you had a flock of sheep that you were the shepherd of, that you were shepherding, and half your flock was killed, what kind of reputation as a shepherd are you going to have? Or if half your flock just went missing, or if they fell off into the river and drowned, or they fell off of a cliff, what kind of a shepherd are you? Not a good one. His name's sake. We have the reputation here. You know, sheep can be led across next to a dangerous cliff, be led next to that mighty rushing river. And as long as they are staying close with their shepherd, they're in safety. As long as they're looking to their shepherd for safety. These animals can learn as long as they stay with them, they'll be fine. Do we learn those same lessons? That if we're staying close to Jesus and we're staying close to his example, we'll be fine. If we're following after his example, the steps that he's been given for us, we are fine. We will be fine. This is the experience we have to have, because so many times we find ourselves in the valley of the shadow of death, don't we? We find ourselves in troubling times, looking for the way, looking for a way out, looking for help. You know, we can find these moments. Are we like David? Can we be like David when he says, I will fear no evil? That's the idea. That's the goal. As long as God's on our side, what's Paul write to the Roman brethren? If God's on our side, who can be against us, right? Romans 8:31. So we've been given this idea. But we've got to choose. Same thing with no fear in the valley. Verse number 4. Yea, though I walk through the valley of shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. And we've talked a little bit about this already. This experience that we have someone guiding us. The rod and staff. I was reading, I believe it was Brother Robert R. Taylor Jr. He's got a book, and he goes through many, many Psalms in his book. It's a classroom book. And I think it was him that was saying that the rod and staff, in that time, the imagery was, this was one item. I'm not going to debate if it's one item or two. We get the imagery of two here, rod and staff. But they're tangible tools is what they are. The rod is there as a weapon to fight off anything that's coming in to attack. You need a weapon. The staff with its crook is used to rescue the sheep from danger, keeping them from danger, pulling them back into the fold where they need to be. Together, what are they representing? The rod and staff. It is absolutely representing God's protective power. It is represented God's gentleness, his guiding hand, and those absolutely provide comfort for us. Comfort so we have no fear in the valley. The shepherd's sufficiency in verse 1. Peace in the pastures, being restored and guided. No fear in the valley here. Look at verse number 5. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup runs over. David is moving away from the illustration here of the sheep, a metaphor here of sheep. He's going to something different. He is now speaking directly from his experiences. You can see David's heart being poured out here, can't you? You know, what an experience it was. Think about everything that David had in his life. You know, starting from that little boy David, the stories that are told in kids' classes that we are in fact can learn from ourselves, with him going up against this giant of a man. of him being a warrior, later on being a king. We've looked at him being a shepherd. He's not a perfect man. But all of his experiences have led him to one thing. He has enemies. He has enemies outside of his kingdom, obviously. David also had enemies inside his kingdom. This picture is painting here is absolutely incredible. God is setting this lavish banquet for him. He's setting everything that he has right there in the presence of his enemies. Feast in the face of the enemy. This is a powerful display of God's blessings. Let's not forget this. Many times if we had a spread similar to this, we'll probably have something similar to this here in a couple of months. We've got that holiday coming up with Thanksgiving. We'll have spreads like this. Maybe you have spreads like that every single Sunday. And that's very likely. But many times we think about, well, I've brought this, I brought this, I brought this. I was 23, 24. I didn't go. I had to work on Thanksgiving, and I had a friend of mine said, "Oh, come with my family to Thanksgiving dinner." And he said, "Now I'll go ahead and tell you, it's going to be crazy." He said, "Everyone's got to say what they brought, and they have to talk about it." And all it was, I brought this, I brought this, I brought this. Sometimes we get to that, man, I've done this. I brought the turkey. Maybe we want the pat on the back. What I would bring, cups or plates. That's what I'm going to bring. You don't want me to cook anything. Jessica, that's fine. She can cook all of it, but you don't want Elliot doing this for you. But is it really about what we do or what God provides? God always provides. This universal sign of being anointed with oil. This is honor. This is favor. This is a cup, not just full, overflowing. Everything we possibly need and then some. This is the idea we're getting from this. More than we could possibly ever need. Overwhelming satisfaction. This is what David is writing about here. The overwhelming satisfaction. The overwhelming provisions coming from God. With all of his enemies, his foes, looking on. The shepherd's sufficiency in verse 1. Peace in his pastures in verse 2. Being restored and guided in verse 4. Or verse 3. No fear in the valley, verse 4. Feast in the face of the enemy in verse number 5. Look at verse 6. Verse 6 tells us, my cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Think about what the Bible is painting us an image of throughout the entirety of the Bible. It's pointing to a powerful truth. A life lived with God is a good life, with blessings on the tail end of it, right? The blessings for eternity. David's driving this point home. This is not just having a good life in a temporary way. This is a blessed life. This is a life of eternal blessings. A life lived with the constant presence of God. This is what we look forward to. This verse is painting us a picture of a permanent residence in the house of God, with God, not just being a temporary visitor. Monday night for the Masters, tomorrow night several people will get together and go visit. I'm not going to be able to go tomorrow night. I'm going to go during the day and on Tuesday during the day. So people will go visit other people. Maybe you have a visit coming. Maybe you go visit someone. If I come to your house, if I knock on your door tomorrow, some may answer the door, some may not. Sometimes we answer the door, sometimes people don't when I knock. But when I come to your house, and whether I'm invited or uninvited, you know what's going to happen eventually? I'm going to leave. That may be a good thing, right? It's probably a blessing that I leave at some point in time. I may stay long, I may stay very brief, but eventually I'm going to leave. I'm not going and setting up shop. If I go to visit you tomorrow and say, you know what, I'm just going to make myself comfortable. This is Casa de Elliot now. This is not the way it works. But with heaven, that's different. If we're working toward this goal of heaven, this is a home, an eternal home, a home that we never have to go anywhere else. My cousin built a house, and him and his wife, or mainly his wife, but he would say this all the time, this is our forever home. This is our forever home. They finally got it built. This is our forever home. About 2.5 years later, that's not a forever home anymore because it's for sale. It's gone. They've sold it since then. They have a new forever home. Folks, we don't have multiple forever homes that we're building and building towards. We're building towards one. We're building towards the home in heaven with God one day. A home, as being described here, with the shepherd. Folks, that is comforting. That's the comfort that only God can provide. We cannot provide this for ourselves. This entirety of this psalm is really inspiring us to serve the Lord with compassion so we get to this point. So we can have the home with the shepherd. Encourage us when we face troubles, to center us on God's unchanging goodness, on that unchanging hand of God, and we can have absolutely no doubts. David had confidence. We can see it with this verse, can we not? The shepherd's sufficiency, the peace in his pastures, being restored and guided, no fear in the valley, feast in the face of the enemy, a home with the shepherd one day. Very briefly, can we make some application here? Is there something more that we can say about this so we can take this away when we leave as we go? Well, this one jumps out at the page, doesn't it? God's providential care. He will supply. David says he will not want for rest. He will not want for refreshment. Why is that? Because God provides genuine rest. God provides comfort. David says he's not in want for leadership and guidance. Why? Because God has guided him. We have it too, do we not? This is God's leadership. This is God's guidance for us. It's up to us to know it and follow it. David says he's not in want for companionship. He's not in want for comfort because God will not leave him. God will never leave us. If someone walks out of this relationship, guess who it is? It's us. David is not wanting for an eternal home because God provides. It's up to us to do the things God tells us through His revelation, the Bible, and for us to follow it. And we meet those conditions, we can have that home in heaven one day. Jesus tells us in John chapter 14, does He not? That He's prepared a place for us, a house with many mansions. This house for us. Do we believe that? You know, obviously Thomas had some problems with it. There were some misunderstandings about going on. But remember how Jesus put the exclamation point on this point in John 14, verse 6? I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one gets to the Father except through Him, right? He is the way. Jesus is that way. God has providentially cares for us. God supplies for us. In times of want, so we can say, I have no wants. In times of weariness, so we can lie down beside the still waters. He supplies guidance. He supplies strength. This has given us an opportunity to develop our faith. How can we develop our faith in a way where we can kind of tie this back in with the 23rd Psalm? Develop your faith. So one day you can say, surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. That's the goal. That's what we need to be doing. That's just what we're trying to do. Don't just halfway develop. Halfway development is not going to get us there. We're not going to make it. We have to think, without trying to preach my Sunday morning lesson tonight for next week, we got to think beyond this life, think beyond the grave. Can we do that? Do we live in such a way where we believe there's life after what we know on this earth? So we can say, I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Not could, not can I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Can we think of more comforting words with eternal meaning? I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. You know another way to put that? God is with me. I am with God. I hope this study has been a reminder for us. It's easy to fall into traps. It's easy to fall into pitfalls. It's easy to feel sorry for ourselves, to think, life's unfair. Why am I always the one dealing with this? All of us can get into it. I was in that frame of mind for about 4 or 5 hours last week. Got something in the mail. I didn't like it. I was like, why is this always kind of following me around? And that's a pretty selfish-minded way of thinking on my part. We're not only being singled out. We need to be reminded what Paul wrote, 1 Corinthians 10, verse number 13. No temptation has overtaken you except such as common to man. But God is faithful. It will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able, but with the temptation will also make the way of escape that you may be able to bear it. We can do it. We can bear up under times. Times those things are seen to be piling on. Go back and read 1 Corinthians 10:13. Go back and read the 23rd Psalm. Our goal is to help us gain a deeper appreciation for what Christ suffered for us, and doing so studying through this 23rd Psalm, this beautiful psalm. Thanks be to God for His faithful guidance for us, His revealing of His will for us that He provides us every single day. Where is all this leading us to? Heaven. We're being led to heaven. But we can be that stubborn old mule too. We can have everything done for us. We can be led and just, you know what, I'm not going that way. We can be there. Don't be the mule. The conditions have been set for us. Have you met the conditions? If you've met the conditions, ask yourself this: are you meeting the conditions? If you're here tonight, maybe you have not met the conditions. Maybe you've never obeyed the gospel. Why don't you do that tonight? Hear, believe, repent, confess, be baptized. Meet those conditions to work out your salvation with fear and trembling. Maybe you have met those conditions. Maybe you have done those things. Maybe you've fallen off the way. I don't remember who it was yesterday, but one of it was either Brother Winkler or Brother Colley or Brother Watkins was talking about the path going one way or another, talking about division. Folks, if we're on a path, we can go off this way. Either way, we're in the ditch. Let's get back on path. If you need to get back on path tonight, we can pray with you. We can pray for you. Here's the takeaway. If you're subject to the Lord's invitation, to heaven's invitation, if you need to respond, won't you do that right now as we stand and as we sing?